WWE hosted its first Slammy Awards in 5 years, this time as an online show with people accepting their awards virtually and others accepting their Slammies in these pre-taped segments backstage at Raw and SmackDown. I'm going to run through the results, or at least of the main categories, and I'm going to give you my picks along the way. My year-end picks for Wrestler of the Year and so forth. Drew McIntyre was voted by the fans as both overall Superstar of the Year in WWE, as well as Male Superstar of the Year. He beat out Roman Reigns, Randy Orton, Braun Strowman, and The Fiend, Bray Wyatt. And in the overall category, he also beat out Asuka, Sasha Banks, Bayley, Becky Lynch, and Charlotte Flair. The correct answer is either Drew McIntyre or Roman Reigns. And my Superstar of the Year pick for 2020 is Drew McIntyre. But only because Roman Reigns missed 5 months. 5 months is a long time. As great as Roman Reigns has been, Drew has been there the entire year, and really from the very beginning of the year where he won the Royal Rumble. It's been this ascent for him. And I think in the ring, you could talk about ratings and everything, but in the ring certainly, and I think on TV he has delivered in the biggest push of his career. And he is the Superstar of the Year in WWE. Roman Reigns is the only thing that really feels somewhat must-see right now on WWE television. But McIntyre, like I said, he's been delivering all year. So you could talk about ratings and everything, but let's be honest, nobody draws ratings in WWE at the moment. Okay, so you can't really put that all on Drew. But from the very first pay-per-view of the year, McIntyre's been killing it, winning the Royal Rumble, beating Brock Lesnar, even though the match was very forgettable because of the circumstances. But he's had great match after great match this year against the likes of Seth Rollins, Bobby Lashley, Randy Orton, Roman Reigns. He delivers more often than not. And I'm glad to see him having the success that he's been having. And, of all the WWE stars, he's the one who has been the most screwed, I think, by this pandemic. And I hope that once fans are back in the buildings, he's able to enjoy it. And it's not just a case of, on to the next one. He had his shot this year. Next year, it's a new year. We pick somebody new and we kind of move him off to the side. I hope that's not the case. I hope he's still, if he's not the guy, hopefully he is still in the mix well into next year. Female Superstar of the Year went to Sasha Banks, beating out Asuka, Bayley, Becky Lynch, and Charlotte Flair. You can't go wrong with any of those first three names. I would have picked Bayley. Bayley and Asuka both were two of the MVPs of those early pandemic shows at the Performance Center. And Asuka was all over the shows over the summer. Almost to the point of Asuka overload. Which is not necessarily a bad thing. But she was, they relied on her so much. I don't know what they would have done without her. I think that division would have died without Asuka. But Bayley had that long run as the SmackDown Women's Champion, the longest ever, and she turned me around on that character. I wasn't much into it at the beginning of the year, but she really found her groove. She would come out and shit on Michael Cole every week and make comments and poke fun at him, and she would shit talk her opponents. You could hear everything, right, because there were no fans in the building. So I think the environment actually lent itself very well to her character. I did a total 180 on Bayley. So I would have chosen her for Female Superstar of 2020. The Slammy for Match of the Year went to the Boneyard match at WrestleMania between The Undertaker and AJ Styles, beating out the greatest wrestling match ever between Edge and Randy Orton. I find that very amusing. It also beat out the Men's Royal Rumble match, Becky against Asuka from the Rumble, AJ and Daniel Bryan in the finals of the IC tournament, the Styles, Sami Zayn, Jeff Hardy match, ladder match from Clash of Champions, Roman Reigns against Jey Uso, I Quit inside Hell in a Cell, Sasha and Bayley, Hell in a Cell for the SmackDown Women's title, Drew and Roman at Survivor Series, and it also beat out The New Day against the Hurt Business in a match on Raw back on November 16th. I loved the Boneyard match. I think most people did, if you can call it a match. That gets into the whole thing with the Boneyard match, and the Money in the Bank matches, and the Stadium Stampede in AEW. Are they really matches? I kind of look at the Boneyard match as more of just one giant fight scene, but however you look at it, the Boneyard match was great. It was unique at the time before they went into cinematic overload, and it gave The Undertaker a chance to go out on a high note, at least until he comes back for the next match. You know, it headlined the first night of WrestleMania, and there is no bigger spot in WWE than the main event of WrestleMania. But of the choices given, it was not the match of the year. I believe WWE Match of the Year honors of the choices that were given from that list I just read off to you belong to Sasha Banks and Bayley at Hell in a Cell for the SmackDown Women's title. The greatest women's Hell in a Cell match, and there haven't been that many of them, but the greatest women's Hell in a Cell match the WWE has ever produced. The story was built up. You talk about long-term storytelling. The story was built up over such an extended period of time. And those two women, much like Asuka, the whole year, the whole summer, were all over TV. Right? Tag team champions they were as well. And everything fed back into the story until Bayley, turned on Sasha finally. And it led to their match at Hell in a Cell. Now, I had hoped they could find a way to extend it to WrestleMania in a stadium in front of an audience, which they could still do, but you can't go back and, the genie is out of the bottle, right? It wasn't the first match they've ever had in their careers, but it really was the first match of this new program. You can't go back and undo that. You can't do the first match over again. I'm not sure there's a real need now to go back and do it. So I was kind of hoping they would find a way, but they felt they had to go to it now, and they couldn't afford to delay it anymore. And they knocked it out of the park. They went in there, they had an outstanding match, they knocked it out of the park. I still don't think it topped their NXT match in Brooklyn, which was about as close to perfect as you can get. But there was no way they could, it's almost unfair to even compare. There's no way they could have matched that atmosphere. One has people, the other doesn't. Two totally different circumstances. So they were never going to, in my mind, they were never going to top that. But I would have given the Slammy to the two of them. Now, that does not mean that it is the match of the year in WWE, or anywhere else for that matter. That's the match of the year based on the choices presented in the Slammy Awards. I'm going to run through my list of the top 10 matches of 2020, WWE and otherwise, next Sunday. First sound off of the new year, episode 685. We'll do the top 10 list on that show. Edge versus Randy Orton won for Rivalry of the Year. They beat out Seth Rollins and the Mysterio family, Drew McIntyre against Randy Orton, Sasha Banks against Bayley, R-Truth against The World, and Lana against the announce tables, Hardy Har Har. That's fine. Edge and Orton is fine. Either that or Sasha versus Bayley. Either one of those I think would have been acceptable. Sasha and Bayley actually weren't feuding, though, for very long. Not until the turn happened. So giving it to Edge and Orton, I think, makes sense. The Street Profits won Tag Team of the Year over the Golden Role Models, Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler, Shinsuke Nakamura and Cesaro, and The New Day. Return of the Year went to Edge over Roman Reigns, MVP, Sami Zayn, and Goldberg. It should have been Roman. It should have been Roman Reigns. Edge's return should have won for the Moment of the Year. They had a separate category for Moment of the Year. That's where Edge should have won. And instead that went to The Undertaker's farewell. Edge returning at the Royal Rumble was a great moment. It got a great reaction. And it was a nice surprise. Even though his name was rumored, it was still a surprise. It was a surprise when his music hit and he came out and he was back in his gear for the first time in 9 years. But, Roman Reigns, he came back, and then a week later, he won the Universal title. And he has gone on to become one of the few things worth watching on TV. So in my book, Roman Reigns is the return of the year. And that was the end of the fan-voted awards. They had the best trash talkers of the year. That went to The Hurt Business for the men. It went to Lacey Evans for the women. WWE Network documentary of the year was The Undertaker Last Ride series, which, of course, Charles Robinson was named referee of the year. Most creative 24/7 finish, for those who care, Drew Gulak dressing up as a janitor to beat up R-Truth for the title. Best ring gear went to New Day. They picked New Day for best ring gear over Sasha Banks. That is a crime. Musical performance of the year went to Elias. Breakout star was the Street Profits, and social media superstar of the year goes to Bayley. Celebrity appearance of the year, Rob Gronkowski. A terrible choice. And if they had any guts, they would have included NXT in these awards. And Pat McAfee would have won. Pat McAfee was the clear winner. I understand he wasn't main roster, but I don't care. You talk about celebrity appearance of the year, Pat McAfee trounces Rob Gronkowski in that department. And double cross of the year was Bayley turning on Sasha Banks. So those were your Slammy Awards for 2020. Again, next Sunday I'll do my top 10 list of the top 10 matches, mine, of the year. You may have your own. And that'll be on next week's show, episode 685. So tune in then.